Hello and welcome to the Pulse of Spokane. I'm your host, Isabella. Today we're here with Barbara Comito, who is the Director of Marketing and Communications at Union Gospel Mission. Barbara, how's it going?
It's great. Yeah, I'm loving the fall weather.
Oh yeah. How was your weekend?
It was good. I mostly relaxed, so it was really nice.
Good. Sounds good. Well, in just a minute, we'll come back and talk with Barb about UGM, what she does for them, and what they do for the community.
We believe every person is created in the image of God with immeasurable beauty and worth, that people should not be defined by their present condition or past mistakes. We are all broken. We need each other. Healing for our brokenness begins with connection, with understanding how much we are loved by a good God. And with healing comes change, the potential for joy and meaning. No one was created for mere survival on the streets, for an existence blurred by mind-numbing substances. Each person is created with a purpose, a unique gift no one else can offer the world. Our job is to help them rediscover it. Real people, real change. Union Gospel Mission.
Hi, I'm Rob Chase, and I'm running for Washington State 4th Legislative District in Spokane County. We need to get back to first principles of respect for providence, tradition, property, and transparency. I'll work in Olympia to make America great again. I believe I can be a good representative for the 4th District because truth matters. Vote for me, Rob Chase.
Paid for by the committee to elect Rob Chase, Republican.
Welcome back to the Pulse. Barbara, let's talk about UGM. Let's start off with what they do for the community here in Spokane.
Okay. I think it's important to understand that Spokane is a super generous community, and there are a lot of great organizations serving the same population that Union Gospel Mission is. And so it's important that we not just duplicate services. So UGM's role is really to be there for people who are in crisis, men, women, and children, who are experiencing homelessness and are ready to change their lives. They want to pursue change. And that might look like a lot of different things. It might look like learning job skills. It might look like addiction recovery. It might look like just the opportunity to budget and save and get on their feet. But UGM is working with people, men, women, and children who are experiencing homelessness. And we are really like that first step to recovery. So all of our shelters operate clean and sober, and that is because for people who want to change their lives, if they've struggled with addiction in the past and then they're around people who are currently using or under the influence, it can be a real trigger for them and make it really difficult for them to pursue that sobriety. And so all of our shelters operate clean and sober, and that is, we are just one piece of the pie. So it's not that we don't think people who are under the influence shouldn't be fed and sheltered. We do, for sure. We want people to be kept alive, definitely. It's just that this is our piece of the pie, is to help people who are ready to pursue life change. And we do that by providing job training. We do that by providing addiction recovery. And part of our unique perspective is that we're a faith-based organization. So we are really based in the gospel. It's our middle name, and that's part of what we do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. Yeah. People experiencing homelessness is definitely an issue that is important here in Spokane, important to recognize.
Yes.
So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So a little bit about you. How long have you been with UGM, and what do you do for them?
So I've been with UGM for almost 13 years, and I started out as the writer. I was the writer for 7 years, and then I became the Director of Marketing and Communications. So really, even in my current role, the job is really about storytelling. It's about telling the story of people, how their lives have changed. It's the story of what UGM has been able to do because of the support of the community. So it's the story of donors and volunteers and residents all working together to bring about this life change.
Absolutely. So you talked about the storytelling. So I'm curious, are there any particular stories that stand out to you about people who are impacted by UGM?
Well, I'd really like to tell you about the two people who we're featuring right now on billboards and on television. So one of them is Cliff. And Cliff really went through our program, finished back in 2008. But that's part of why I love telling his story, because he's a story of long-term life change, right? He's been sober now for 14 and a half years. Wow. He's been at the same job for 12 years. He's been married for 8 years, and he's really engaged in giving back and making a difference in his daughter's lives, his granddaughter, and his nephew. And then he also works with the YMCA with teenagers. So he's really engaged. But he has a history of generational alcoholism from both of his brothers and himself, his two parents, grandparents, and it just goes back generations that they struggled with this addiction. Yeah. And so Cliff is part of the story of breaking the cycle, and he needed to have a safe place to do that. He needed to have a clean and sober place to do that. He needed to have a place where he could learn to handle his emotions, because he describes himself, he's self-described as, he said he was an angry drunk. And so he would get drunk, and then these emotions they didn't know what to do with would come out in violence. And so he ended up in and out of juvenile detention, in and out of jail. But now he has this long history, and so I guess it just really points to a person really making the decision to change and then being equipped with everything he needed to do that.
Absolutely.
The other person we're featuring right now is Emily, and I absolutely love her. Just connected. That's one of my favorite things, is just to hear people's stories and to have them trust me to tell their story, and then to become a little part of that is really exciting. And so Emily was just in the darkest of dark places. Like, if you were going to say, oh, that's a hopeless addict. There really isn't any such thing, but if you were going to label someone, then she might have been one of those people. She had lost her 4 children. She had lost her marriage. She was living on the streets. She burned her finger in smoking meth. It got infected. She lost her arm. One of her ex-boyfriends set her on fire. So we're just talking about the darkest of darkness, right?
Yeah.
And now here she is. She's come out of that. She's clean and sober. She is beautiful. She is actually the director of volunteers for Life Services. So her life has completely just been transformed and come out of darkness. And she would say that the thing that changed for her was grace, just experiencing grace. And when she looks back on that time period, she really gets emotional, and she says, I just needed so much help. She really has compassion on who she was. So she found that help through Anna Ogden Hall. That's our women's recovery program here in Spokane. And her life is completely changed. So that's where our role in the community comes in.
Wow, those are incredible stories.
Aren't they? Yeah.
Is there a way that you guys maintain those relationships with people who are impacted by your service?
That is such a great question, and that is something we are continually striving toward, because research shows that if someone stays in sobriety for 5 years, they have an 85% chance of succeeding in ongoing recovery for the rest of their life. But that relapse is a huge part of recovery. And so getting to that 5-year mark and just really making the daily choice to stay in ongoing recovery requires community. So we do seek to help people connect to, they've been in this really supportive, so our long-term recovery program is 18 months to 2 years. So they've been in this kind of like greenhouse of, support. And then you move back out into the community, and it becomes really important to create another network of support, right? Because some people don't come from super supportive families or super healthy families, and they can't necessarily just move right back into that situation that they came from. So it's really important to have like a mentor. So we try to match people up with mentors who can help them just walk through those daily things in life, and to connect them with a church, to connect them with a job where we're hoping not just a survival job, but a job where they can find meaning and purpose and really enjoy their work. And so all of those pieces come together to help someone make it to that, ideally, that 5-year mark. And so that's called our aftercare program, and we're continually trying to find better ways to do that. Transitional housing is something that we're really interested in for the future. We are doing it right now in Coeur d'Alene with our Women and Children's Center up there. We purchased 3 4-plexes where women can move from our recovery program into those apartments and continue to have support. So those are all things that we're trying to do to extend that period of ongoing recovery.
Absolutely. That's so important to maintain that. Definitely.
Right.
So you mentioned there are a few criticisms of UGM. Are there specific aspects of that you'd like to touch on here?
Well, I touched on one of them earlier in the sense that our shelters are considered high barrier. So that means there's barriers, and those barriers are that you need to be clean and sober, right? Mm-hmm. And so that can be a barrier if you're still living in addiction. But the reason for that is that not that we don't think people are valuable and have value while they're living in addiction. We definitely do. But we want to create a safe and healing environment for people who are ready to change their lives. Mm-hmm. If we were the only game in town, that would be one thing, right? But there are other shelters providing food and shelter for people who are currently under the influence or living in addiction. And so our role in the community is to provide this safe, healing environment for people who are ready to change. Also for women who have children, you just really don't want to have people who are living in addiction in the same building, in the same living area as children, right? So we're trying to create safe and healing environments for people to make that first step toward recovery, and then hopefully the next step and the next step, and continue for the rest of their lives. So that's, I think, one of the things that I would want to address.
Absolutely. So before we have to go today, let's talk a little bit about sort of the future of UGM and short term, what's required to accomplish long-term change?
I think Sean Vestal had an interesting article in the Spokesman Review just a couple of days ago, and it really wasn't about homelessness per se. It was about the cycle of people in and out of jail or in and out of prison and just kind of repeat offenders. But at the heart of that, he was talking about mental illness and substance abuse. And I think you have to realize that some of these things, so there's homelessness, and then underneath homelessness, there's often, not always, but often addiction. But you know what? It doesn't end there. Underneath addiction is almost, like a huge percentage of the time, there's trauma. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's childhood trauma. So a study was done several years ago by Kaiser and the Centers for Disease Control that identified adverse childhood experiences as a really big contributing factor to homelessness, to addiction, to criminal behavior. And if you don't address those adverse childhood experiences, then sobriety doesn't really get to the whole healing that needs to take place. Mm-hmm. So we talk about whole person recovery and dealing with, so having counseling, individual one-on-one counseling, group therapy where you're with your peers and sharing experiences that other people, and you find out that other people have many of the same experiences that you've had. And then there's also, so that contributes to the social healing of relationships. So people are usually damaged in relationships. That's how people usually get hurt. But they also heal through relationships. So they're scared to trust, but they need to build healthy, good relationships in order to heal. So that's why our program takes so long. It's this whole person idea that you've got to deal with. You might have been called stupid, like maybe you had a learning disability and you were called stupid for years and years. And now, so you dropped out of high school, now you need to get your GED, you need to get back in there. And that's going to only happen if you have the support you need to make that happen. So this whole person recovery is what's really needed, and it's not simple, and it's not easy, and it's a lot more complicated than food and shelter. Mm-hmm. So while food and shelter is critically important, and we just absolutely believe in that, we also believe that you've got to build relationship and deal with these underlying deep-seated issues.
Absolutely. We've got to address those deeper experiences that play a huge role in.
Or otherwise, real healing cannot happen without that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It was great. Great to meet you.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you. And thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Pulse of Spokane. We'll see you next time.
Hi, I'm State Rep Jenny Graham. The pandemic has set us all back, which is why I'm working to get our schools and our economy running again, so we can all get back to school and work safely. We must restore our economy, and we must protect our interests from budget cuts caused by reckless Democrat spending.
Paid for by the committee to re-elect Jenny Graham, Republican.
Thanks for watching. Ask the host a question, recommend a guest, or check out any of our other programs on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or SpokaneTalksMedia.com. Sponsored by Local 29 Firefighters Union, Well Dressed Walrus, and Homes for You.